Delegates and panelists at this year's Infrastructure Africa Business Forum sat Nelisiwe Magubane, Chairman of Matleng Energy, and she joins us in studio now to give us a better sense of the kind of conversations that were had and whether we are seeing stride being made beyond the talk shop. Thanks so much, Nelly, for joining us in studio today. So I don't think that there's any doubt about the fact that infrastructure development on the continent is key to economic growth. The problem is, we've heard this all before. How much progress are we actually seeing in closing the gap?
I must say there is some progress, however it's very, very slow. It could be better because we are seeing a situation where some of the infrastructure is being developed in some countries, but in most cases it's usually not coordinated, it's piecemeal, and also it's not effective in that regard.
Mm-hmm. With that being recognized, why is that proving such a challenge to overcome?
For me, or rather my belief is that infrastructure development it's a successful public-private partnership. So what we need therefore to have a private sector that is thriving, and also we need to have a government that creates an enabling environment for private sector to participate. Now, in order for private sector to thrive, you need to make sure that you have effective legislative framework and also regulatory certainty, and also we must have independent regulators that transcends the various administrations, because if that's the case, then you create an environment that is conducive for investment. And what usually happens in this regard, you find that some of these projects, they last for years, or rather the return on investment lasts for years, 20 years at least. So if you are going to be putting your money in a project for 20 years, you would like to have a stable regulatory environment.
Absolutely, because that to an extent would also ensure the kind of returns you're able to see down the line. For now, though, the scenario is proving to be more so debilitating than anything else. I mean, I picked up a stat that in sub-Saharan Africa, poor infrastructure cuts national economic growth by 2 percentage points every year and reduces productivity by as much as 40%. How much of a contributing factor to that is ineffective power supply and energy solutions?
I would say it contributes a lot, because what happens is that if you do not have energy, then even if you are able to have agricultural produce, you do not have refrigeration. And if you do not have refrigeration, even if say you are able to go and have a fishing industry, then it means then you've got to sell your product the very same day, and it has got to be cooked the very same day. So not only it limits the amount of food production, but it also limits able to do certain things. For example, think of education. If say you've got energy, we are able to have all the kind of ICT equipment that is required and to prepare our children for the workplace that keeps on changing, and it's very, very technologically driven.
So let's put focus on the conference itself. What's part of the solution that's been put on the table at this year's conference? Are there new opportunities for seizing when it comes to developing infrastructure that governments need to start thinking a lot more seriously about?
The opportunities that are there right now have always been there. Think of Grand Inga. I mean, people have been talking about that project since 1950s, and you talk about a transmission line called Zizabona, which is Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia. All those projects, they've been actually being talked about for quite a while. So it simply means then you need to make sure then that there is harmonization of legislation in those jurisdictions. But what came out of the conference very loud and clear was that the Presidential Infrastructure Committee needs to make sure that there is legislative framework that is that everybody can actually buy into, but also the financial development institutions also needs to come to the party to de-risk the projects, because at this point in time, private sector is still very skeptical about putting their investments into the infrastructure because they are a little bit worried because of regulatory instability.
Absolutely, because what that does is, skew the risk-reward metric completely out of their favor. Are you seeing governments put more favorable terms or incentives forward for investors that use African inputs specifically? And to what extent does that start to tip the scales a bit and pique investor interest?
Oh, definitely that is going to be a lot. I mean, South Africa is a case in point. The Renewable Energy IPP program actually attracted so much interest from both internal investors and also foreign investors. We actually saw our own banking industry participating very, very effectively in that program. So what it simply means then is that the government just needs to be able to create an enabling environment and then let the private sector be able to do what they do best, which is basically making sure that they make sober investment decisions.
If that incentive is put on the table and private sector, is encouraged to use African inputs, do you see Africa managing to cater to the demand? So let's say from a skills perspective, do we have the right skills to cater to what private sector needs?
Definitely. I believe that we do have abundance of skills in the continent, and we've seen that where some of those skills being exported through all kinds of diasporas and finding some of the African people outside their own countries of birth. So that tells you that the skills are there. All it needs to happen is for the infrastructure to be developed, and then it will attract those skills back, because a whole lot of people would like to put back into their communities.
Absolutely. Let's leave it there. Thanks so much, Nelisiwe, for having joined us in studio this afternoon. Of course, Nelisiwe Magubane is chairman of Matleng Energy. And in just a moment, we have the manager of NEPAD's Africa Infrastructure Desk joining us in studio to get to grips with regional infrastructural development and whether that's gaining any traction. So stay with us.
When you're growing a business, you're not just doing it for yourself.